see where we left off. So I was talking about 1 year, 3 year, and 100-year projects, right? So we know that almost any meaningful social change is a 100-year project, right? It's something that transforms us, those around us, and the things that serve us and the people we serve, right? So I wanted to think about some things that are true and some things that make sense and some things that kind of only kind of make sense, right? So when we're thinking about power, we have to understand where power derives, right? Power is a relational statement, right? It's a relation. It's a relationship. It's something that relates. You have power in relation to someone else, right? In relation to some other thing. So when we're thinking about that, I look at some of the situations we find ourselves in Black community and in Black organizing spaces, and one of those is someone asked me, Montu, they said, I don't understand why my youth program is not working, right? So we do a lot of youth work, we do a lot of youth organizing. So why won't our youth program work? We have a lot of youth that are engaged, a lot of young people that are involved in it. Why isn't that transforming the community itself, right? And I assert that the reason why our youth programming models aren't working currently, right? And it's based on models that we've been following since the 80s, which is you work with the kid, you invest in the kid, transform the kid, they'll transform community, is because community is not the primary organizing unit in Black community. The primary organizing unit in Black community is Black family, right? Black family is the primary organizing unit. So any development, any improvement, any social services, social service programs aimed at particular members of the community, I assert are bound to fail. But when we start focusing on family development, move from a youth development space to a family development space, we'll see community transform. And I thought about this after watching and being involved in so many community organizations doing community work. And that's when I realized that it wasn't that we were doing bad work or weren't trying hard or weren't giving our best effort. It's because the community isn't the primary organizing unit. It's the family, right? We have to start with the family, right? And so investing in the child and not investing in the mother is a fool's errand, right? Investing in the son and not restoring the father is something a crazy person would do, right? So investing in Black family. And then I also run into people who seem to have a really strange relationship with government. So I ask people, what is the purpose of government? What do you think the purpose is? If anybody wanted to scream out what they think the purpose is, let me tell you, I think it's 3 answers I've heard over the years. One is help, one is hurt, one is get out of my way. They think the government is here to get out of your way, or they think it's here to hurt you, or they think it's here to help. Those are generally the answers I hear, right? Like if you ask me, I think the purpose of government is to help me. If government isn't here to help me, I have no use for government, right? So government is here to help me. Government does everything. I see a lot of people, complain about government checks, but no one complains when those contracts come through to build schools and build infrastructure in the neighborhood. Those are also government checks. They just don't go to your Black hands, right? But those are also government checks. So what is government here to do? Is government here to help you, hurt you, or get out of your way? Montu, what do you say?
Help. Like they have to. Like you have to be able to. So these structures are like where I'm going to be working. I'm gonna be working at the school. Wouldn't have that without the government. So I believe the government's here to help. What do y'all think?
And your whole life is government. Your whole life is politics. The roads. There is
everything.
The biggest lie here oftentimes is you could do it yourself. You can't because no one else has, and you shouldn't have to, right? We are here to collaborate. We are here to communicate. We are here to work together with one another. It's just you've been blocked out so long, you might not realize that just yet. But all these structures are here to help us. If the school isn't teaching, we don't pull our kids out. we go into the schools and make the schools do right.
That's right.
If the public transportation isn't adequate to where I can live a life and work a job and go out on a date if I want to on public transportation, that's a public transportation problem. That's not a Travis problem, right? That's a public transportation problem, which is a government problem, right? And so, and then I get a lot of people who ask me about business and politics, and I think sometimes they're trying to black business they way out of blackness. And unfortunately, that's an impossibility, right? The social structures are in place to access the opportunities to loans, the access to the education needed, to the information to be able to even apply for these loans, right? There is no business without politics, right? There is no access to business without politics, right? We have to remember that if the family is the primary organizing unit, then the family is the primary political actors, right? We act on behalf of one another, on behalf of our neighbors, on behalf of our friends.
Righteous.
And through that, people will get the business contracts, right? So I was in a meeting with some people making decisions on who gets millions of dollars in government contracts in Athens. A bunch of money comes through between UGA and the local government. And when you look at the money that comes through, nearly none of those dollars go to black businesses, right? When confronted, several of these very important elected people argued that there was no black businesses that were ready, that met the requirements to get the government contract, right? And I think that they thought that was a good argument. See, it's y'all doing wrong. If you just get your business together, we'll give you the money. We ain't giving you the money because you ain't doing your job. My demand then became, well, you need to invest in the programs and invest in these businesses to get them up to the level to be able to apply for the contract. See, that's an opportunity for a government program, for government intervention, right? That's an opportunity for government to invest in black community. There's a good way to look at it is every house that you see get built, that's not just some big check being cut to build a house. That's 5 to 7 subcontractors, right? That's 5 to 7 subcontractors. You know what every house build has to have? It has to have a porta potty, sometimes 2, and it has to have a dumpster, right? That's an easy thing. Government can give me the grant right now, and I can go buy those porta potties and take them to and fro these places and get that government contract, right? So government created the problem. Government has to solve the problem. We have to make government solve it, but government has to solve the problem. So again, what is the purpose of government, right? So if the purpose of government is to help you, then the government is not government assistance, government programs, government funding, grants, and the like are not handouts. These things are a debt that is owed, right? These things are a social debt. These things are a particular debt related to your identity claim, right? To your lineal claim. And it's also just a societal debt, right? If government is here to help me, government should help me be a functional entrepreneur. Government should help me to be a functional father, a functional mother, to have the resources and material goods I need to live in a space beyond mere material deprivation, right? So when we think about power, we thinking about, hold on, stay back on that page. When we think about power, we think about, now we're really going to talk about it because we've kind of set up a framework or a way to look at things. Government is here to help. We have to make government help, but government has to give us the means to do so, right? So when you think about the library, like what's the point of the library, right? The library is in there just so we can check out books and do nice things. That's great. And the books that I'm referencing, I put on that table. They stacked them up. That's good. Those are some good books. We'll talk about them. But it's because you need an informed demos. You need an informed citizenry, right? The library is here so I can know what I'm voting for, so I can go read about social structures, so that I can go read about economics. So when they try to pass a SPLOST tax, I can do the research to know what it is and inform my wife and inform my children, and we can vote together as a family unit, right? This attempt to splinter the black family unit as individual voting pockets, like we don't vote with our wives, like we don't vote with our husbands, like we don't vote with our friends and neighbors and cousins, is kind of crazy in and of itself, right? But when we think about the black family as the primary organizing unit, we can bust up against that. It's just a matter of conception, right? So the basic question is, how does power manifest itself socially? So we're gonna run through that. All right. So when we think about power, power is something that there are a lot of misconceptions about. So we're gonna be talking about structural, institutional, systemic power, right? So we're talking about two basic meanings when you hear power, right? And as I say it, and you think about it, you'll realize that your idea of power fits into one of these two, or it may be an amalgamation of the two, right? So that when you have power, you're either talking about someone has the power to, so the power to do something, right? Or power over someone or something, right? So the power to do something, right? Or the power over someone or something, right? So power is the result of a series of ongoing interactions of people in the world, right? So power is never static. It's dynamic. Circumstances change, as I always say, right? And sometimes you'll see, sometimes our politicians pretend like circumstances didn't change, right? Like black people didn't turn Georgia blue. They pretend and they forget sometimes. And sometimes events like this have to remind them that black people turned this state blue, right? There is a political obligation that is created with that, right? To hear our claims, to talk to us seriously and sincerely about our claims. So three basic types of power, right? We're talking about force, coercion, and influence, right? Force is very direct. It's almost inherently what we think about when we think about power. Coercion is a step back from force, right? It's the threat of force to get an outcome, right? So my ability, power as a relational statement that describes my ability to impose my will or to create outcomes for myself, even with you in the way, right? So force, punch, coercion, threat to punch, and influence. You know, I punched Bob the other day. You don't want to mess with me, right? Because that's not a direct coercion. That's more of an influence. I know that he's a tough guy and he punches people, right? So when we think about power, it's a couple thinkers that have been really influential to me. One of those is Karl Marx, right? I fundamentally disagree with a lot of things Marx wrote, and some of the thinkers who've written after Marx, but uh, power does not belong to you. Power is not an individual asset you hold, right? We said it's a relational statement. It's not like a brush or a pencil or a sheet of paper, right? It's not something you individually hold and you can individually lose, right? You can gain or relinquish some power in relation to where you stand socially with someone else. And it's not an understanding, right? Oftentimes you'll hear people say that they feel empowered, right? Not that they have been, not that any decisions by institutions or government has been democratized, but that they feel empowered because someone listened to them, right? Which is nice. It's good to feel good, right? But we're talking about democratization of the major decisions and level pulls in government and in society. So when we're thinking about power, we're talking about when we think about force, we can think about force in really force and power in three more different ways, but kind of like offshoots, right? So we're thinking of brute force or brute power, right? So that's lifting a box, me physically, mechanically moving or changing the circumstance of something, right? Cooperative power, me and Montu collaborate together to move an even larger box, right? And then structural power, Bob is the mayor. He can tell me to move the box, right? He can get us to move the box, right? For his benefit, for social benefit, and otherwise. So again, power is a statement of relational leverage, the ability of persons and groups to impose will. Right? So who, what, where, when, how, and why do issues come to require an outcome, right? Because if something gets into the political space, it's something that now needs a decision made. How do things get to a point of a decision needing to be made? That's a question for the group. How do things get to a point of a decision needing to be made? let's say there's a pothole in my neighborhood, right? There's a pothole right outside of my house. That's a problem for me. The road is a public road. It's owned by the government. How does that issue get to the point of a structural decision by government actors? Contact my rep. Contact my. That's what I love so much, really, about watching local government, is because someone is always yelling about a pothole, and it's really inspiring because they really take this pothole really serious and fight for it, right? Because that's a real problem they facing every day, right? Just like I'm facing the threat of state coercion and state violence through the hands of police and institutional actors. They're facing the same thing in that pothole in a very sometimes comical way, but it's something that they face every day, and to see them do it, it really is inspiring. So how does an issue like let's say you find out that your neighborhood has bad water, right? When we think about Flint, right? We think about Flint. We think about, or even closer to home, when we think about some of the really I mean, Georgia has so many counties with serious environmental problems that are primarily racial. Landfills, a great example, right? So how do issues like that become known? If you don't know about it, right, someone has to educate and inform you, get you aware of the thing that is, right? Because even when we think about Flint, right, we know that there was lead in the water. Well, what significance does that have, right? Does it make the water taste bad? No, I don't know. I can't really taste it. Obama was so crazy that time he drank the water on that news conference. I remember, if I remember correctly, that was crazy. So, so you think it might not have been that water? It might have been a different water. And so when we think about lead in the water, lead is a neurotoxin, right? What do neurotoxins do? Neurotoxins lower your IQ. They impact and impede your ability to exercise inhibitions. They disrupt your neurobiological growth, right? So Bobby, who's 5 years old, has been drinking neurotoxin water his entire life, and when Bobby turns 19, he might slap his girlfriend, right? Is that a social problem? Is that a Bobby problem? Is that our problem? Is that a community problem? The way we conceive that problem is directly related to how we educate ourselves and how we educate within the community, right? So when we think about our social conditions, right, we think about the world around us. We live in a state. So what's the significance of the state? I remember we were doing a car caravan about defund the police, something that is I think this group really kind of took it to a different place, but that's not really the point. And so we were doing this caravan. They asked me to come and do a radio show where the protesters would listen, and they were having all kind of issues, right? And to be able to educate them via the radio and break it down to where no one was arrested that day. The police got a little rowdy, the people got a little rowdy, but no one was arrested, no one was hurt. Was a great instance of what political education can do, right? But it started with getting them to understand, like when they were talking about a monopoly of violence held by the state, or something of the sort, right? And that's not really a accurate conception of it, right? The state has a monopoly of force, not necessarily violence. Hannah Arendt, one of my favorite political theorists, says where there is violence, there is no power. Right? That power is if you have power, you won't utilize violence. Right? So that's one way to think of it. But the state can authorize and enable some actors and some people to use force and disable other actors to not use force. Right? So the state also manages identity and justice claims. The state enables and disables actions. We talked about that, and the state authorizes commons. A couple months ago, we started doing these vaccine drives. Right, we started doing a bunch of vaccine drives in the community, and it was problematic enough that people weren't getting vaccinated. But what was really troubling was it was being described as hesitancy. See, it's you black people, it's you poor white people, it's you little Mexican boy. Y'all don't want to get the vaccine. We want to give it to you. You don't want to get it. And that's crazy, right? It wasn't a matter of hesitancy. To the extent I'm hesitant is because of the institutional distrust. And distrust, again, is a relationship. It's a relationship, right? You can make our relationship bad, right? It's not something that I necessarily can do independently, right? So we started doing these vaccines, and we were collaborating with some elected people, and I pulled Montu in. I said, "Look, I got to get you here, brother, because I need somebody to cuss at when the meeting over with." And so we go to these meetings, and they wanted to do it far out. We decided we needed to do it in the government housing where our people was, where we organized so much, right? And one of the limiting factors in where we've been able to even have some of these vaccine drives, and we've been fortunate enough to get a large swath of the black community in Athens vaccinated, and we still got so many gaps and still got so many places to go, is the Department of Public Health wasn't ready to make the kind of commitment that we needed them to make in order to transform our health and social situation under the COVID conditions, right? And so after getting no emails and no callbacks, I thought of something, and Montu remembers this. He remembers the whole thing, not just this part I'm talking about. But in 2006, my sister passed away from AIDS. She lost her battle with AIDS in 2006. And so I started getting involved and engaging with people in the HIV/AIDS community. And I realized that the one resource that the DPH will sometime invest in black community is HIV/AIDS testing and screening, right? So what does that tell me? That tells me that those people that are doing that screening at least aren't afraid of black people in the most obvious way, because they have to deal with them, because it's the only resource they send into our community, right? So we started organizing with those people. And we got those people to put pressure on the people that control them and their supervisors. And next thing you know, we got vaccination drives popping up in government housing. We go into the barbershops and they giving out vaccinations, right? Because this group, as imperfect as that resource allotment was, it gave us at least a starting point to work with some people who would be sensitive to the issues that our community was facing as it relates to distrust towards the vaccine, right? They managed this whole thing crazy and let propaganda run wild on Facebook and TikTok. I did not know people was getting news on TikTok till we started going door to door. I didn't even know you could get news on there. Go ahead. And so the one of the limiting factors, like I said, was the fact that it's very few common spaces, right? And the state authorizes commons, right? So areas for people to meet and do activities, have get-togethers, have all kind of stuff, but most importantly, to organize for political action, right? If you see a lack of organizing, you probably have a lack of commons in your community. So a lack of places where people can go and don't have to pay no money and can sit down with other people who don't have money, who want to organize and do work and change the community, right? It takes time to establish those kinds of things. So we're usually sitting in a political space that was advocated for, fought for, and constructed over 10 years ago, right? So we have to think about as community grows, as new community needs pop up, we have to confront those. At one of the local community centers, they've brought in some kind of technology kind of floor, right? But they haven't staffed anybody with it, right? So there's no one there with the expertise to teach our kids how to use this technology, and that was the whole point of it. So even when we get something, the fight has to continue to perfect that outlay, right? To perfect that institutional outlay. All right, so you heard me reference political action. So when we think about political action, we have to think about harm, and harm can be personal or it can be communal harm, right? And that can be a deficit, a material or social deficit. It can be inequality, so inequality in outcome, access. In inequality usually serves as the basis for our organizing efforts, because harm is sometimes hard to articulate, right? Particularly social harm. So anything that's not directly material that we can't count from and put on a scale and weigh and look at a number to identify with. So, but harm has to be recognized by those harmed to exist and recognized by the structural forces to legitimate it, right? So I recently did a symposium about slavery at UGA, right? And it was they had all these words in the title, and one of the words they used was recognition, right? And what I realized is that they really didn't want to recognize what was done. So one of the stories I told was of this brother named John Lee Everhard. He was lynched 100 years ago in Athens, right? So 100 years ago he was arrested, wrongfully arrested, and he was in the courthouse, being held in the jail cell in the courthouse. And the Klan and random white supremacists, they ran in the courthouse and they dragged him out of the courthouse, tied him to a tree, and burned him alive, right? So when we talk about recognition, right? When we talk about recognizing that harm, it's not sufficient enough to even put up a placard. It's not sufficient enough to even write a little resolution, which they did to the local government's credit when it was brought up and everything. But to truly recognize it in kind, right? So he was pulled out of the courthouse. So I want a placard and a statue on the steps of the courthouse, right? I want the harm that was caused to him and his family recognized, because recognition gets us closer to redress, right? There's a debt owed to that man's family and his lineage that should be paid, right? And that gets us just a step closer. So advocates use political means to cause institutions and institutional actors to recognize harm, right? So this is sit-ins, this is marches, this is educational and political events, rallies. These are these sorts of things, right? But redress presupposes recognition. Redress is a material political outcome. However, symbolism is often used by the state to dodge redress, right? So when we talk about symbolism, well, let me take a step back. So what is recognition, right? Recognition is it really creates a obligation to the observer, right? So the person, not the person recognized, but to the person doing the recognizing, and it creates an obligation to cultivate and defend through solidarity, express universal respect, right? So when we're talking about respect, we're talking about autonomy and dignity, right? Respecting the autonomy and dignity of the person you are recognizing, right? Institutions do this as opposed to stigmatizing groups, right? When we think about stigma, we're talking about discredited institutional and structural relationships, right? So the police don't believe you because you're a brother. The police don't believe you because you got dreads. Your job won't promote you because it don't like your natural hair, right? Like these are relationships that you're experiencing stigmatization, right? Spoiled identity, as it's been called. So that's why at times recognition can be very elusive, right? But one thing I notice also, particularly lately, is I don't think a lot of people have thought about what justice is or what justice means or how they would even define justice, right? And sometimes people look at justice as just an institutional artifact, right? So something that an institution creates or produces, right? So let's using Breonna Taylor for example, right? Because those officers weren't held to account, that therefore justice is impossible, or she won't get justice, or there is no justice for Breonna Taylor, right? Uh, I would submit that justice is a virtue, right? It's something that we're striving for. It's an imperfect striving. Maybe we never reach it. Maybe we never get there. But the work is that continued effort. So I say that to say, what would be justice for me from a Breonna Taylor standpoint? What murdered that young lady was some crazy racist wild cops, right? But how did they get into that house? Through a no-knock warrant, right? What would be justice for Breonna Taylor? A federal ban on no-knock warrants, right? State by state ban on no-knock warrants. There will never be another Breonna Taylor or anyone caught in that situation again, right? We can't change the hearts and minds of people, right? That might not prevent that particular instance, but what we can do is disenable status actors, political actors, elected people, and police officers to behave in the ways that produce that woman's death. right? That killed her, right? That murdered her. So we only got a few more minutes left, so I'm gonna try to run through. So so when we're thinking about power and we're thinking about institutions, I just want to leave with a couple quick points. So someone would ask me, what is an institution? When you're thinking about what is an institution as opposed to an organization, right? As opposed to the state itself, right? The state is oftentimes can be thought of as being made up of a bunch of institutions, but functionally, right? What is an institution? It's something that mediates a state. Institutions are the mediating agents between people in the state, right? So the hospital is an institution, right? Because it mediates the health needs of the people with the state's obligation to keep the people safe, right? So that is what institutions mediate between people and what they need. So institutions also process individuals, validate and invalidate claims, and yeah, so we'll go ahead. All right, so we only got a few minutes left. Too, you wanted to throw anything out there? If y'all have any questions, ideas, thoughts, anything you wanted to get off your chest, say. This would be a very appropriate time for questions, ideas, or anything of the sorts. All right. Yes, sir. We will get that email. We actually had a whole thing, but we couldn't get Wi-Fi, so we'll send that out to be got to people. Yes, sir.
Boots on the ground.
All right. So
Anything else? Anybody have any questions, concerns, comments?
anybody want to share some interesting work they're doing back home, their neighborhood, their community, their block, and their family? Yes, ma'am. Or if you feel like you can vocalize that far, shoot.
Yeah, come on, come on.
Trying to be loud. Trying to be loud.
Thank you all so much for this event. My name is Efat Walker. I'm running for Rockdale County Post 2 Commission. Listen, today is a dynamic day. It's an opportunity to get people registered to vote. We have so many people that are out there doing the work. Please, please, please take what the information that you have from here today, take it back to your communities, get people registered, register at least 5 other people. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Absolutely.
And we just have to remember, like, the network is where the power is at. Power is in the people. So, these events are always great. We can come together, hand out some literature and all that, but we have to put our boots on the ground and actually get some work done. So we have to network. We have to move. We have to do some action. We got to make some things happen. So let's take these events and really grow something from them.
And when we look at a world post SB 202, right? When we look at a world in this voter suppression point of view, right? Worldview. The big problem we have to remember is not SB02 and what is authorized and what is disabled from SB 202. The real problem is that the idea that undergirds that policy is some nonsense, crazy claim that somehow the election was stolen from a wild orange-haired man. That is the crazy aspect of SB 202, right? Is that it justifies and legitimates via our governor and via our General Assembly that somehow the election was stolen or the election results were illegitimate, and not actually making a claim that they were illegitimate, not actually litigating the legitimacy of those claims, because that's already been decided, but to create a political ethos that would authorize future disabling acts, right? It's one thing to say, okay, when you do your absentee ballot, you have to have an ID. What is the next step? Because that next step is what we need to be organizing against, because that next step is going to be the one that really gets rid of a crop of voters. That next step is the one that's really going to authorize the state to come in and take over election boards sua sponte, without any sort of claim, just directed by by the Secretary of State. And we saw what happened the last time the Secretary of State had his hands on the election in a way. Okay, so let's keep that in mind and let's remember that. But so yeah, I think that is important, right? So when we're thinking about how important it is to vote, is critical. But you know what's also equally important, to be an active member of the demos, period, right? You vote and then you go to the meeting. You can't go to the meeting, find somebody in your building, right, find somebody in your neighborhood that can go, that can be there a few minutes, right? That can come back and share that information with you, right? It's been a bunch of shootings in our neighborhood crazily lately in Athens, and one of the neighborhoods where it was kind of the wildest sort of expression of it was the same neighborhood who I helped the older lady get her toilet fixed because the landlord refused to fix the toilet. Well, a landlord that won't fix the toilet is definitely not putting you in social conditions that would be safe and thoughtful and encourage growth of the individual people and individuals in that community, right? But now we're taking steps to try to organize towards a neighborhood association, so a restorative framing of a neighborhood watch, right? And looking at each one of these deficits that pop up in our community and trying to address them collaboratively as a community, and with the understanding that the black family is the primary organizing unit, right? So going door to door, just trying to get folks to understand, hey, you want some washing machines because that will make your social life easier. Boom. Well, you need to come to this meeting so we can also talk about getting this custodial worker some better wages so he'll work a little bit harder, and making sure that they clean up and get this dumpster right. So taking those little steps. So I don't know. They said 5 minutes ago, like 10 minutes ago. I got a bunch I can still. All right. So any other questions? All right. Go for it. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Good afternoon, folks. My name is Michael. I'm with Georgia Stand Up in the Orange. How you doing, brother? Listen, we're registering people to vote. There's a lot of different organizations that are registering people to vote. However, what I want to share with you, if you did not vote last election, if your address or name has changed in the last year, if you're not sure, if you're still registered to vote, please come back and see us under the orange tents back there with the orange shirts, so we can make sure that your information is accurate, and so when you go to one of the polls, you will not be turned around like it has happened before, okay? Thank you all so much. Have a wonderful time.
Yes. Before I go, I do want to say one thing. We have to take these spaces back. So we need to start filling up these Board of Education meetings. We need to start filling up these commission meetings. We got to take these spaces back, because if you're not going to these spaces and getting active, then, these kind of events is going to be meaningless. So we really got to take what that fire that we get here, and we got to take them back to our communities and start filling up these spaces, because if we don't fill up these spaces, someone else will, and they're not going to be necessarily for us.
So you want to take us out with a little call and response?
Let's do a little call and response. So, in Athens, I'm called the ambassador of Classic City Hip Hop, because I do a lot of hip hop, and we do a lot of political action with the hip hop community. So some of y'all was here, some of y'all wasn't. So there's a lot more people here, so I feel like we should be a little louder now, all right? So if you wasn't here, when I say black voters, you say matter. Black voters!
Matter!
That was like 5 people, man. Come on. We can do better than that. Black voters!
Matter!
Black voters!
Matter!
Black voters!
Matter!
Let's get active.
And I just want to lead. I'm gonna lead this for y'all. The future political leaders do something with this. I think we need to make, just like they just made Juneteenth a national holiday. Election Day needs to be a national holiday. Everybody needs that day off work, paid holiday. We need to have celebrations, parties. See, I'm from South Florida and we party. But I'm gonna tell you what. I'm talking about parades. I'm talking about floats. I'm talking about real get-togethers, right? And really get people excited about democracy. You want to change the world. You want to change your community. Get people excited about political activity, about political action. It don't gotta be your life, but your life is contingent on it. Understand? You want a job that makes sense. You got to do politics that makes sense, right? You want a home that makes sense, you got to do politics that makes sense. You want your child to be loved, you got to do politics like you love your child, right? Thank y'all.
Testing, one, two, three.
Quick announcements real quick. Just want everyone to know that we got the live band coming up soon. We got the food trucks in the back are about to be opening up soon. If you need to use the restroom, we have porta potties over here.